The nationwide vacatur and block of the ATF pistol brace and SBR rule is now being impacted by the new Trump executive order to protect Second Amendment rights. Now, before we jump into this video, I want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Brownells. You guys know that Brownells is an amazing company. They're pro Second Amendment, they're pro freedom, and they support what we do here on the channel. So if you want to support an amazing company, check out Brownells, and if you use my code SCHOLAR10, you can get 10% off of any order. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we have some very important news in the battle against the ATF and their current restrictions on brace pistols as SBRs. Currently, there is a nationwide vacatur of the pistol brace rule and multiple preliminary injunctions which are also protecting various TOA organizations and also their memberships as well. However, now with the new Trump administration in power, and recently Trump issuing the executive order on the Second Amendment to protect the Second Amendment, some very important things are now developing in these lawsuits. Last we talked about with the whole pistol brace issue in the Mock versus Garland case, there were reports that employees of the ATF were still making some statements that they believe, the ATF believed that they could enforce their interpretation of brace pistols as SBRs because they believe the NFA and the statutory text still included those items as SBRs. This, of course, was very concerning, and GOA, Gun Owners of America, pressed the ATF on that position, and at the end of the Biden administration, they kind of walked back those statements. Now, currently, like I mentioned, there is a major pistol brace challenge and lawsuit, the Mock versus Garland case, that is currently in front of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals on a final merits, and we're waiting for oral arguments to happen in that case. The Mock lawsuit is the challenge that is currently blocking the pistol brace rule nationwide because we got a vacatur from the lower court judge. However, now the Trump administration has control of the case, and they notified the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals that they want to hold the pending decision and review of this case, essentially so the new administration can determine how they want to proceed forward on this issue. Do they even want to litigate it, or are potentially they going to rescind and maybe even drop the pistol brace rule? Now, you may recall that the ATF recently kind of took a risk with the pistol brace cases, and they appealed all of those up to the Fifth Circuit, even though the Fifth Circuit had already ruled against them on preliminary injunctions. Now, there were a bunch of appeals that went up, the Mock versus Garland case, the Brito versus Garland case, the Texas case as well, and all of those at that time were preliminary injunction reviews. And the Fifth Circuit decided to consolidate about 6 of those cases and was set to have them argued back in last September. The ATF argued that despite what the Fifth Circuit had already said in the Mock preliminary injunction case, the lower courts were wrong to follow that prior ruling. They also doubled down saying that the relief granted by the lower courts, which included the Brito nationwide preliminary injunction, that was too broad and therefore it needed to be struck down by the Fifth Circuit. Now, if you're not aware, recently you had the Brito versus ATF case, which was decided by Judge Matthew Kaczmarek, and he issued a preliminary injunction blocking the brace rule entirely nationwide. Now, that decision by Judge Kaczmarek was a preliminary injunction decision, but it used a prior decision by Judge O'Connor in the Mock versus Garland case. But as I mentioned, the Fifth Circuit consolidated a lot of those preliminary injunction reviews. They were scheduled to be heard, but then Judge O'Connor issued a final merits decision in the Mock lawsuit. In that Mock lawsuit, he issued a final decision striking down the pistol brace rule entirely on the final merits. So that was a nationwide vacatur of the rule on the final merits. Now, in that decision, Judge O'Connor stated that at the conclusion of the majority's careful analysis, they held that the final rule is properly characterized as a legislative rule, and it is relatively straightforward that the final rule was not a logical outgrowth from the proposed rule. Therefore, the final rule must be set aside as unlawful or otherwise remanded for appropriate remediation. Now, that decision was huge because it was a final merits decision which struck down the brace rule entirely nationwide, and that's been recognized by the ATF and other circuit courts as well. Now, in response to that new decision, the ATF decided to appeal to the Fifth Circuit. Now, currently, all the briefs have been submitted to the Fifth Circuit in that Mock case, and we're waiting for oral arguments to take place. There were also some interesting developments, like I mentioned, where recently GOA had some interactions with the ATF, where the ATF seemed to take the position that despite that decision and that ruling by Judge O'Connor, the ATF could still regulate braced pistols as SBRs purely under the statutory text. But at that time, at the end of the Biden administration, they kind of walked back those arguments. And now you have the Trump administration who has taken office, and they're taking control of this lawsuit and others. And they just notified the Fifth Circuit that they want to hold review of this case so they can determine what they want to do going forward. The notice from the Attorney General's office to the Fifth Circuit states that Following a change in administration on February 7th, 2025, President Trump issued an executive order titled Protecting Second Amendment Rights. Among other things, the order directs the Attorney General to examine various actions of executive departments and agencies to assess any ongoing infringements on the Second Amendment rights of our citizens and present a proposed plan of action to the President through the Domestic Policy Advisory to protect the Second Amendment rights of all Americans. And the order specifically directs the Attorney General as part of the process to review all rules promulgated by the Department of Justice, including the ATF from January 2021 through January 2025, pertaining to firearms and/or firearms licensee issues. In light of that development, the government respectively moves to hold this case in abeyance for 60 days pending review of the challenged rule. An abeyance will conserve party and judicial resources and promote the efficient and orderly disposition of this appeal, including by ensuring that litigation is focused on enduring agency action and informed by the views of the current agency leadership. The government respectfully proposes that at the end of the 60-day abeyance period, the parties can provide the court with a status report regarding future steps in this case. So the Trump administration is already taking action on this executive order that he issued to protect the Second Amendment. They had notified the Fifth Circuit to delay review of this mock case so that the administration can determine how they want to proceed forward, and if ultimately they even want to litigate this issue. And if they decide to dump the pistol brace rule, of course, that's going to impact this lawsuit. Oral arguments in the Fifth Circuit pistol brace case in this mock lawsuit with the nationwide vacatur, those are still currently pending. They have not happened yet, but I anticipate that the Fifth Circuit will grant Trump and his administration's request to delay this case. Now, what this also implicates is that there will likely be a radical shift in policy by the ATF and DOJ on this specific issue and in these cases. I personally would prefer, of course, for the Fifth Circuit to rule on this case and establish some precedent against this type of brace ban and this type of brace rule. And that would also help in the future if a new administration came in. They could not simply try to once again put in place a brace ban and regulate these types of items and these types of firearms. But we will see ultimately how the Trump administration decides they want to proceed forward. But my preference would be for the Fifth Circuit to be allowed to actually issue their decision. So with Trump and his administration now taking over, we're going to see some very interesting things kind of develop. There's some interesting options on the table, and they get to decide how they want to proceed forward with some of these lawsuits that the Biden administration engaged in that they are now having to take on because of the prior administration. Remember, this was something that was heavily litigated by Biden and his ATF. This was a rule put in place by Biden and the ATF during that administration. So now Trump and his office are having to decide what they want to do going forward. Keep in mind, there is still also that pending executive order report that needs to be submitted to Trump in March, and that could include how the AG actually wants to handle the pistol brace issue in all of these cases. That report will include other very significant 2A topics and other cases that are currently going on. But overall, what we're seeing right now is the Trump administration is notifying the courts that, there's a new administration. They may have new policies on these issues. They potentially will take a different position in these lawsuits, or maybe even drop these rules entirely. And because of that, they are asking for some delays and some additional time to file some of these briefs and ultimately address these issues. So that's what's currently going on in the pistol brace issue with the mock case where we got the nationwide vacatur of the rule. The good thing with this is it's not going to impact that nationwide vacatur at all during this period. So that will still be in place and pistol braces will still be protected at least during this abeyance. So as we get more information, as things unravel and as things develop, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. Even just dropping a positive comment or just a comment in support of the channel and this type of 2A news helps to tell the algorithm that you see value in this and it should send it to more people. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.